watching the India development debate. I'm Tamanna Inamdar. We now know the top team that will have the tough task to fulfill raised expectations as Prime Minister Modi embarks on his second term. Amit Shah, PM Modi's closest confidant, will be handling the Home Ministry and is now clearly positioned as the second senior-most member of the government after the Prime Minister. Nirmala Sitharaman as Finance Minister has been the big surprise. And with Jayshankar's inclusion as External Affairs Minister, the CCS, or the Cabinet Committee on Security, the top team, so to speak, has two new faces, Amit Shah and S Jayshankar. Rajnath Singh is now Defence Minister. But even as congratulations poured in for the new ministers and they hit the ground running, taking on charge today, two sets of data released painted a gloomy picture. Growth has slowed to 5.8%, the worst in 5 years. Employment data, which was leaked earlier and officially released today, confirms that unemployment is at 6.1%. The government says you can't compare this number to earlier data, but if you did, that would take unemployment to a 45-year high. Clearly, this team has its task cut out for it, but is it in a position to fulfill the weight of expectations? To speak more on this, I am joined today by Sumant Sinha, Chairman and Chief Executive Officer, Renew Power Ventures, Gautam Chikarmane, Vice President of ORF, Siraj Hussain, former Agricultural Secretary, Radhika Ramaseshan, Senior Journalist, and Neerja Chaudhary, political commentator and columnist. Welcome to all of you and thank you for joining us on the show today. Gautam, I'm going to start with you to just take us through the entire day and also in the context of the data points that we have seen today. Because with all the congratulations and the euphoria of a new team, knowing who's heading finance, what the team looks like, this was a stark reminder that the situation is grim.
Indeed, growth, any cut in growth is bad news for the economy, and growth at no cost must be compromised. The fact that the growth rate has fallen now is a serious sign of concern, and Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman has to now hit the ground running, and not only running, she has to be sprinting. And I think in the first 100 days, her options are very clear. There is a budget ahead. In that budget, she needs to showcase that there is a policy continuity going on between the previous 5 years and which will move on to the next 5 years. This continuity is dependent on two parts. The first is reaching out to the bottom 100 million people in terms of schemes and entitlements, and at the top end through wealth creation. So you have wealth redistribution on the one side and wealth creation on the other. I believe the government has walked a few steps towards wealth creation, but not enough, and Nirmala Sitharaman has her task cut out. In the budget, she needs to talk about reforms. Obviously, no reform can happen on a single document, but there must be a clear and unambiguous direction that the government is intent on moving on reforms. Finally, if at all there is one tinkering that she needs to do in this budget, it should be on equalizing the long-term tax treatment on capital gains across various assets. As you know, equities are taxed, long-term capital gains on equities are for 1 year. On real estate, it's 2 years, and on bonds, it's 3 years. I think this needs to be equalized. In the financialization of India, where we are headed, these are very essential and important points. The other two things that she needs to do in her 100 days is deliver GST 2.0. GST 2.1 was a landmark law. It was a political victory where all the parties were brought together, all states were brought together and drafted into a single law. That law had some problems, particularly dealing with compliances on small businesses, which have now been cleared. But even now, we have 6 rates. These have to go down to 3, and the compliance burden has to be reduced. Finally, I think she needs to start delivering, and not just talking, delivering on disinvesting public sector enterprises. And there is enough talk, there is enough data available, but between 2016 and 2018, there were 19 new central public sector enterprises added. I think this has to now reverse, and more PSEs have to be disinvested.
No, Absolutely, that's a very clear sort of pathway that you've laid out there, Gautam. The question is that in the face of what we're seeing right now in the economy, is the government of the day equipped to really deal with it? Of course, the mandate is there politically, there is no question. But from what we've seen in term one, the approach has been incremental change. The focus is also on big welfare spends. And you know, we've heard that the PM Kisan scheme is also being extended. That is the first big decision. Let me come to Sumant Sinha here for his thoughts. First of all, Mr. Sinha, let's get a comment from you on the composition of the new team. Nirmala Sitharaman is a finance minister, Rajnath Singh in defense, and Amit Shah handling home. Of course, S Jayshankar in external affairs. If you want to sum up the top four.
Well, thank you, Tamanna. I think the new cabinet and council of ministers is actually a very interesting mix of continuity and some degree of change. There are a lot of new ministers as well who have been sworn in. I think, to me, the two most interesting people who entered the cabinet, of course, are Amit Shah, who's come in as Home Minister, and of course Mr. Jayshankar, who is a fairly inspired choice for the Ministry of External Affairs position, just given his many years of experience and his his fairly stellar contribution on a couple of the previous foreign affairs issues that we've had to face as a country. So I think he obviously enjoys the trust and confidence of the Prime Minister, and that is why he's got the position that he has. I think if you look at the infrastructure ministries, there is a lot of continuity. Mr. Gadkari continues as, let's say, the transport minister in general. He's also been given MSME in addition to that, which I think the government sees as being a big job creator. So it's been given to somebody who has a track record of achievement, who can therefore contribute in this area. In addition, if you look at Piyush Goyal continues as railways, and of course in power sector, Mr. R.K. Singh continues as well. And Mr. Hardeep Singh, I think, as Urban Affairs Minister. So I think there is a lot of continuity in some of these important infrastructure sectors. But in addition, I think the interesting thing that has happened is that a lot of the ministers have got dual responsibilities. And I think that is interesting to see how that plays out, because in a lot of cases, these ministries are not actually related to each other. And perhaps what might have made more sense is actually clubbing ministries that actually at least have some relationship to each other. For example, taking all of transportation, including civil aviation, and clubbing it under Mr. Gadkari, that could have been, for example, one way to go. The Prime Minister has chosen to go a different way, and that's, I guess, fine. We shall have to see how it evolves as it goes forward. So I think it's going to be an interesting next 5 years from that standpoint.
Yeah.
I think the other interesting selection is that of Mrs. Nirmala Sitharaman as Finance Minister. I think she is a fairly modern thinker. She has prior experience in the ministry. She's worked across the defense ministry as well. So she's got a fairly broad experience now, having 5 years of working in various different ministries. And I think therefore she brings a lot of experience now to the table in the role of finance minister. And I'm actually very eager to see the kind of thought process and the kind of skill sets and competencies that she brings to the table in this role. I think for me, the most important thing here is going to be in the first budget that she presents is not just the specifics of what she presents for the coming year, but in a sense, it becomes the roadmap for the government for the next 5 years.
Yeah.
And that is something that is going to be interesting to watch out for. What are the things that the government says about privatization? What does it say about reviving the financial sector, which is really in a bit of a mess right now and needs to be corrected? What does it say about reviving growth, which is now sort of sinking and has gone down to 5.8, perhaps could go down to lower levels than that over the next few quarters? What does it say about a whole host of areas in terms of infrastructure build out, social welfare programs, subsidies, and so on? So it's actually a very heavy agenda. And I think what is going to be really interesting to see is in the first budget, how much does Mrs. Sitharaman spell out in terms of the government's positions and views on these areas, of course, apart from what it does in terms of trying to revive in the very short term the economy, because given where it has got to, it certainly does need a fairly significant kickstart to get it moving back again.
No, absolutely.
So I think An interesting 5 years coming up.
No, interesting 5 years and a challenging 5 years coming up, even as the team has been unveiled. Let me come to Nirja Chaudhary. Nirja, we've been speaking over the last few days of what Amit Shah would do. Many expected him to take on finance, but he's now taken on home. How does that also change the nature of sorts of government when you have a powerhouse like Amit Shah as a key minister? This has been a very PMO-led government so far, but Amit Shah coming in, does it change equations?
I think, I would say this is a cabinet of Narendra Modi himself. It has the stamp of Mr. Modi completely. 2014, he was helped by Arun Jaitley. He was new to Delhi. So a lot of the inputs were Mr. Jaitley's. This time around, it is Amit Shah who's assisted him. Amit Shah is clearly the number 2 in the government. We saw that in the way he was at the Prime Minister's house, calling up ministers who were going to be inducting, and many hours that he spent with the Prime Minister going over who would be in the Council of Ministers, the portfolios that they would get. So it is really Modi and Amit Shah led government, Mr. Amit Shah being clearly number 2, even without being designated so, and clearly really also seen as Mr. Modi's successor. Now coming to the high table has changed. While there is continuity in other ministries by and large, of course there are several younger people who have been taken in and they have given very interesting signals also, like Mr. Sarangi from Odisha, who moves around even today on a bicycle. So this move towards subaltern politics that Mr. Modi is emphasizing, somebody like him is a symbol of that. But that apart is the high table. Home Minister, the 4 top people along with the Prime Minister who will constitute the Cabinet Committee on Security, Home Minister, Mr. Amit Shah, Mr. S Jayshankar, External Affairs, Nirmala Sitharaman, Finance, unexpected as you said, and Rajnath Singh moved to Defence. So those 4 departments have changed hands. Now, I would say that yes, Mr. Amit Shah's induction means that the party and the government will now move towards the fulfillment of the core agenda of the BJP. Mr. Amit Shah has already spoken about it during the campaign, whether it's Article 370, whether it's 35A, the whole question of how to handle Jammu and Kashmir, also how to handle Naxal issues,
yes.
National Register of Citizens, and down the line the building of the temple, maybe uniform civil code. I think I expect the government and the party to move in that direction. So it will be a tougher state, a more muscular internal policy also by this government that we can look forward to.
Well, that's interesting because it was already a muscular approach that was adopted in term 1. I want to get Siraj Hussain in on the other very key portfolios, and we keep talking about the big 4, and of course those are the highlight sort of portfolio allocations here. But let's not forget agriculture and Narendra Singh Tomar, who has his task cut out for him as well. Clearly, rural distress in the agri sector is going to be a big focus. Mr. Hussain, one that the current government, even with its popularity, cannot afford to ignore for a moment, because the election cycle just goes on and on.
Right. So, Mr. Tomar has been given charge of 2 ministries, Ministry of Agriculture and Ministry of Rural Development.
Yeah.
So, I think this move will bring synergy between 2 ministries, because a lot of money is spent under the Ministry of Rural Development, which can be coordinated to work for the benefit of agriculture. Even though efforts have been made in the past to bring synergy, but I think it is a good move. So, agriculture has a very difficult agenda to implement, because water is going to be a major issue in the times to come, and the issue of water scarcity cannot be solved by giving money directly into farmers' bank accounts. as the government found it to be very successful. On the eve of elections, PM Kisan was announced, and in UP alone 1 crore farmers received the first installment of rupees 2,000 in their bank accounts. So, it helped a great deal, but implementing a long term policy in agriculture is not going to be easy, but I am sure the government with its commitment to improving the lot of agriculture will do its best to bring synergy between various departments and also with these state governments, because a lot of these schemes are actually implemented by the states.
Absolutely. Radhika Ramaseshan, let me come to you on, the other big ticket ones. Interestingly, Siraj Hussain, you spoke about water resources. Look at, the Jal Shakti Ministry, which is a newly named ministry. Two have been merged and given to Gajendra Singh Shekhawat in line with the promise of, piped water to every household, which is in the BJP manifesto. So clearly, that also tells you where the focus is. But Radhika Ramaseshan, can we come to the messaging from the portfolio allocations from a political point of view as well? Perhaps more regional representation was expected. Allies have been given their due, but not any larger than life portfolios. The JDU also stepped out. One can guess it's because they didn't like what was being offered, but then they just had to lump it.
Yeah, we don't know what was offered to the JDU in the first place. Whether they asked for one ministry or two ministries, it's a bit ambiguous, because Mr. Nitish Kumar gave a longish soundbite today, and there was no clarity. He said we didn't expect anything, and he kind of capped the speculation at that. Shiv Sena has got one ministry, and the Akali Dal has also got one ministry. So that's as far as the allies go. But what I noticed and what I was told a day after the results were out is that Mr. Modi will spend at least a couple of days assessing, studying the message of the mandate. To him, that is very important, and then he will get down to the task of ministry making. So, as somebody said, regional representation is there, to the extent that Mr. Muralidharan from Kerala has also been given a ministry. Now that, one ministry, MOS from Kerala, should by itself not make much of a difference, but what is important is the political signal that the BJP has tried to beam into a state where it does see potential for growth. Doubtless it has been trying to get a foothold in Kerala for years. The RSS has a base in North Kerala, but that hasn't necessarily translated into votes. So that's as far as Kerala goes. Bengal, where they reaped a bounty, has got a fair share of representation in the Council of Ministers. UP and Bihar, of course, the usual suspects have probably got the bulk of the share, as has Maharashtra. So regional representation has been very good. I mean, barring Tamil Nadu, which is still unrepresented, all the other states are properly represented in the Council of Ministers, and that to me is very important, because the sum of the mandate is the votes that were, or the number of seats that were contributed by each and every state. And let me tell you, for Mr. Modi and Mr. Amit Shah, there are no big states, no small states. They will take a Tripura as seriously as they take an Uttar Pradesh. They will take a local body election in the Andaman as seriously as an assembly election in Rajasthan. So let us be very clear about that. So, in the days to come, you have elections coming up in Maharashtra, Haryana and Jharkhand. So, normally in the first year of any government, you would expect the government to take tough measures. First 2 years are when they can sort of play around and, really implement tough policies. But the BJP is so yoked to winning elections that I do not see Nirmala Sitharaman's budget as being a particularly tough economic reforms oriented one, because from day one, the thrust of Mr. Modi's speeches has been on the poor, on alleviating poverty. He thinks he has the captive votes of the poor. I mean, he's sort of sitting on a bounty of votes from the poor. So whatever measures are taken is going to be oriented towards the welfare of the poor, towards the well-being, and it's not going to be in the form of dribs and drabs like PM Kisan Yojana or toilets in villages.
Suman Sinha in on that. Radhika,
Good point there.
Good point there. Let me get Suman Sinha in on that, because Mr. Sinha, you opened, talking about what the expectations were of industry and those who are pushing for economic reforms, and the fact is that along with its governance skill, the BJP has also transformed into an election winning machine, and these things will be there or will weigh on the mind as budgets are prepared, as policies are unveiled. Also, the incrementalism has worked for them politically, which at the end of the day for politicians and those wanting to stay in government are the ultimate touchstone. So do you think that industry will have to make do with those kind of incremental reforms and a better implementation of the reforms that were announced in term 1?
Well, I can't really look into Mr. Modi's mind and exactly analyze how he's thinking about this.
Sure, no one should do that.
In his mind, he feels that incrementalism has been rewarded. And whether he feels therefore that incrementalism is something that has been rewarded, and therefore that's the way forward. And there are many other aspects of his going to the voters and his electoral appeal that go over and above the economic side. And therefore, whether he needs to or doesn't need to pay attention to the economic side. So I can't really speak to that 100%, but all I can say is that, as far as I know, he was fairly, very focused on winning this particular election. That election has been won. He's got an even bigger mandate that he had earlier, and I think that is now behind him. I think now, if anything, he'll be looking for his position in the history books. He'll be looking for his legacy. He'll be looking to create a strong India, which he's talked about many times. And I think he also understands that you can't create a really strong country without having a very strong economic base. And I think that's a lesson that all of us have learned from what's happened in China, which is that the country, 50 years ago was the same size economically as India. Today, it's 5 times the size of India's. And along with that size, has also come the economic heft, the foreign policy heft, the geostrategic influence, and all of those other factors. So I think Mr. Modi realizes that, and I think therefore he is not going to just sit on the sidelines this time and try to just carry on with incrementalism and just carry on with the only thought being on how to win elections. I think that is something that also has to be done, but I think he'll also probably understand that good economics in the long run will also be good politics, and therefore I think he will focus on the economic side as well. Now, you can have philosophical differences as to what constitutes good economics, and different people may have different views on that. But I think there are some fundamental factors that I think he's talked about earlier that I think we can deduce a little bit from. Number one, he's talked about minimum government, maximum governance as being one statement that he's made. A second statement that he's made in the past is that the government has no business to be in business. And I think if I just take those two particular points of view or those particular statements, I think those, to me at least, seem to indicate that he does have an understanding that business has to be done by the corporate sector, that the government has to encourage that, and ensure that the government does get out of maybe running large amounts of public sector enterprises and so on. Now, you might well ask to that, why has he therefore not actually gone ahead and privatized public sector companies and really pushed harder on that front? And my feeling on that is that he's not done that because at some level he feels that the value that you might get. Yeah.
Sure. Sorry, please continue. But I just wanted to come in with the point that in terms of disinvestment, it's been sort of a quasi or a pseudo disinvestment where one arm of the government buys from the other. And you're not really letting go of stale assets. In fact, Air India will be another big challenge which Hardeep Singh Puri will have to face.
I agree with you, and I think part of the reason for that is that capital markets in general have been not in very good shape, and therefore, it's not been that easy to sell these public sector enterprises. And I think, and the point I was making is that while you may want to sell them, if you don't find buyers, as in the case of Air India, because the entity is just not in good financial and operational health, you will not be able to sell them. So you have to restore them to some degree of efficiency, some degree of financial health before you're actually able to sell them. You also have to wait to some extent for financial markets to correct and for buyers to be interested in investing in large amounts of dollars in a country like India, which is not necessarily that straightforward and easy. So while we may say, look, let's go out and privatize all of these big companies, actually doing it practically and getting good value for the people of India does require some preparatory work before you can actually do that. So let's hope that is really what he was thinking, and that therefore in the next 5 years, if the feeling is that he's restored these entities to good health, that he's able to then privatize them, and there's sufficient amount of interest to do that. So that is something I'd be watching out for. For me, that is going to be a fairly important indicator of whether in fact he truly genuinely believes in let's say in a freer market environment, or whether he believes in statist, socialist type of a status quo system that we've had so far. The second thing I'd be looking at is the public sector banking system. Public sector banks account for 70% of our deposit base, account for a much smaller share of our lending, and have been in poor shape for quite some time. And this whole thing about government ownership, to have them managed better, has clearly not resulted in anything positive, because we spent such tens of thousands of crores in terms of trying to recapitalize these banks, and we'll have to carry on spending that much more money. Now that is your and my taxpayer money, and I am not happy as a taxpayer for us to, for the benefit of having these public sector banks, just carry on pumping money down that whole thing. So I think there are some of these fundamental issues that the Prime Minister will have to look at. These are philosophical issues, and they have to emanate really from his core beliefs, and really in terms of the direction that he wants to take the country in. And I think he will be focused much more about his long-term economic and political legacy now than perhaps he was in the last 5-year term. And so I think in that sense, we may see a slightly different approach to the economic side than we have seen in the last 5 years. But make no mistake, it is not as in the last 5 years there were no economic reforms.
No, absolutely.
The IBC code came in.
No, absolutely. IBC has been a good.
GST got implemented.
Sure. IBC, GST have been there
in the last 5 years as well.
Yeah, but can we continue with that pace is the question, and we have to look at it in the light of data that we've seen today. I'm going to take a very short break and come back to this fascinating conversation. We're talking about two, key aspects here of the new cabinet. One is, of course, the political messaging that has come out of it, and second, the tough economic challenges that they have to face. We'll be right back. All right, it's a big day here for India, because you know who your next top team is, the government which is going to run the country for the next 5 years. Of course, there may be reshuffles up ahead, but we'll have to wait and see that. For now, this is the top team. The top four, of course, Amit Shah, Rajnath Singh, Nirmala Sitharaman as Finance Minister, S Jayshankar as External Affairs Minister. Let's take a look at the ministries which matter to industry, the economic ministries, and those are important ones as well. And let me get in, my panel for that. Neeta Chaudhary, let me come to that. And I found that quite interesting, because of course you have Nirmala Sitharaman, who is handling finance. You have Anurag Thakur, who is MOS, but then you have Piyush Goyal with something like commerce. You have Nitin Gadkari looking at MSMEs. So in a sense, the responsibilities are going to be spread out. Of course, the finance minister is the finance minister, no doubt about that, but to move the country ahead economically.
Yeah, I think, while the challenge is really on the economic front, and you've spelt it out during the course of the program, we are, the slowing down of the growth, the increase in unemployment, the economy hovering on the verge of recession. I mean, the banking sector, it's all been spelt out, we know it. Therefore, what is going to be the panacea? Is the PM going for the big bang reforms, land or labor? I think the Prime Minister, I'd be very surprised if the Prime Minister moves away from his pro-poor policies, because that is the massive mandate that has come. He turned the BJP's support base on its head, from Baniya Brahmin party to one that is today considered pro-poor, and it is the poor ordinary people who said ye garibon ka sahara hai. So therefore one is not surprised that PM Kisan Yojana is being extended, and rightly so, because unless you get money in the hands of people and increase their purchasing powers, there won't be the demand for goods. So that is something he will go in for, but he will not move, for those who feel that he will move away from this focus of reaching out to the ordinary people and making their lives better. I don't think that is going to happen. And as far as the Prime Minister's office is even going to be more powerful in the second term, and the economic ministries will work, and ministers will probably in all likelihood be working very closely with the Prime Minister's office on the policies to pursue. I think that happened in the first term also. It's probably going to happen even more so in the second term.
Okay, Gautam, can I come to you with that same question? The economic ministries, and let me add to that and broaden the sort of stage for that. For example, Santosh Gangwar looking at MOS independent charge for Ministry of Labour and Employment in light of the CSO data, the data that we have seen today, the jobless growth data. He also has his task cut out for him.
Yes, he does, but there is very little that he can do on his own. The best he can do is try and bring all the 35 central legislations that govern labour into one or two acts of parliament, which is an entire repealing and readjustment of how the legislative setup on labour is concerned. When you do that, what happens is that what we have right now is a law for minimum wage, a law for a specific kind of work, for instance, newsmen. You have a law for industrial disputes. All these laws need to come together into just two parts. One is for safety of workers, the other is for their wages. Once he does this, this has to now pass through the legislative channels. If the Narendra Modi government attempts any legislative changes like this, or let us say the Indian Financial Code, which has been waiting for the last 6 years, or the FRDI bill, which looks at an early warning system for financial firms that are on the verge of failure, then they have to wait for the last 2 years when they have a majority in the Rajya Sabha.
Yeah.
So my point is very simple, that any legislative reforms that they are looking at, which includes labour, which includes land and other restructuring, should be pushed back to the last 2 years of this government's tenure, while the executive reforms such as disinvestment or reworking the GST should be front-loaded. I think this government will not have any problem on the executive reforms. It will have some problems in the legislative side, which in the last 2 years will go away. So for infrastructure, for instance, you need land. The price of land has increased by 4.5 times in the last 3 years. But you need Land Acquisition Act to be amended in order to do that. How do you do this? And one last point I want to make. I got cut off for a while, but somebody mentioned that the government needs to work on agriculture. I fully agree and endorse it. But we must realize that agriculture is a state subject in the constitution. At some point, the states who are now getting a larger share of revenues from the successive finance commissions need to take the responsibility of managing agriculture on their own. For instance, each state has the right to decide whether agricultural income will be taxed. If the taxation part of, let us say, rich farmers is vested in the state governments, why should the central government be getting in when the farmers have a problem? This is not to say farmers' problem should not be attended to. The point I'm making is a constitutional point. Agriculture is a state subject.
Yes.
I think it's time for the center to start stepping out of this. The politics may be difficult, but I think this is inevitable.
Let me get Siraj Hussain, former Agri Secretary, on that point. Agriculture is, of course, a huge political statement. We've seen that in the first cabinet briefing, how important agriculture has been as a subject. Okay, Siraj Hussain, can you hear me? Okay, I don't have Siraj Hussain there. Let me try and get him back. But let me come to Radhika Ramaseshan on the point of, politically agriculture is a key subject. The government has started off with a big focus on agriculture. And is it fair to say that at the end of the day, it's a state subject? By the way, even if they say that, most of the states are now BJP run.
The land acquisition law, which bill, the amendment, which NDA 1 tried very hard to bring, and they had to abandon it. Of course, they don't have a majority in the Rajya Sabha, which is why every assembly election that is coming up is so crucial if the BJP has to get the numbers in the Rajya Sabha. Now, they tossed it out of the window because if you remember, Rahul Gandhi started this whole campaign of Soot Boot Ki Sarkar, and he made the land acquisition amendments a focal point to show that this government is anti-farmers. So they quickly abandoned that. Now they've basically left it to their state governments to implement land acquisition in whatever manner they choose. But if we are talking broadly of a policy perspective, I would imagine that Mr. Modi's approach will be to take the middle path between being incremental and being exponential. I do not think he's going to be terribly adventurous. In fact, indeed, his whole perspective on economics has changed when he came to move from Gujarat to Delhi. In Gujarat, his policies were designed to essentially towards the middle class, both the settled middle class as well as an aspirational middle class, which he called the neo middle class. In Delhi, he reckoned that the poor form the core of India's politics, and hence his policies, his approach, his perspectives, everything was designed to keeping the poor in mind, and I do not see him veering from that approach at all. Now, if he has to do some, of course he will have to bring in economic reforms, and I'm sure Nirmala Sitharaman is acutely conscious of that, but I still think those will be in the nature of some tinkering here and there, no big bang kind of things. I do not foresee that. And of course, agriculture is very important, which is why that's one of the first things on this government's agenda today. Remember, agrarian distress cost them 3 states in not so long ago in December, which of course they were able to overcome in these elections, partially because the PM Kisan was implemented and partially because Mr. Modi has the credibility still to convince people that he alone can solve their problems in the near future. So people were in a mood to give him a second mandate, and he is not going to let them down. Agriculture and rural development have
I've
both
got Siraj
been,
Hussain back.
given to
Siraj Hussain, I don't know if you heard the comment that Gautam Chikarmani made, where he said that agriculture is at the end of the day a state subject, and even though it's a politically difficult decision, a lot of these decisions should be left to the state governments.
I don't agree with him fully. You see, who brought green revolution to India? Was it the state governments? Who operates fertilizer subsidy in the country? Do the states have any share in that? So it is the center, rightly or wrongly, which makes major policies on agriculture. And I did not see the kind of push which was required to bring agricultural marketing reforms in the Modi 1 government. ENAM was brought, which was a great initiative, but Gujarat itself did not implement the reforms. So if we leave it to the states, do you think GST could have been implemented if it was left to the states? The constitution was amended, and both the center and the states surrendered their power of imposing taxes and gave it to the GST council. So it was such a major reform, and the states were brought on board to take forward that process of reform. I do not think it is correct to say that the states on their own will be able to do it. Of course, the states have to complement the effort of the center, but this center has to take lead, and now that BJP is in power in most of the states, surely if the central government wants, the states will fall in line.
Gautam, do you want to respond to that?
I think among his points, I disagree with him, but I think he made one interesting point that maybe there is an amendment ahead wherein agriculture can be moved out of the state list and put in the concurrent list, and then this whole system can continue. But then the money that the states get through the Finance Commission, whose share has been increasing over the years, needs to be looked at again. So I think it's a more complex debate. I agree, farmers, actually it's not an agricultural problem, it's a livelihood issue. And farmers' income needs to be supported. In season 1 of Modi, they had come out by saying that we will double farmers' income in the next 4 years. Now season 2 is here. And let's see what they do. The point I made was more conceptual. And perhaps if we clear the conceptual, if we get a conceptual clarity on the constitutional nature of this, as well as the financing part, I think we will move much faster. Why agriculture is with the states? Because each region has a unique soil, a unique geography, a unique weather system and climate and so on. And therefore they were thought to be more efficient in managing those resources. But if today, through a constitutional amendment, we want to bring agriculture into the concurrent list, we should do that. When we do that, we must tax the rich farmers.
Okay, that of course is one of those things that we keep talking about, but I don't know if you're going to see rich farmers of any kind being taxed at any point. In fact, there's news that the PM Kisan Yojana is being extended irrespective of land holding. So if anything, you're going quite in the opposite direction. You know, Radhika Ramaseshan, let me come back to you, and this is a bit of maybe a long shot, but you know, on the back of the news of the PM Kisan Yojana being extended, the kind of situation we're seeing with unemployment, with agriculture, do you think that the income support sort of welfareism has made its start in Indian governance and could only expand in the days to come?
Yeah, certainly. I think this PPM Kisan, the extension, has marked the start of welfareism. You are probably going to see more measures for the unorganized sector. I mean, a sector which the BJP has very consciously demarcated as something with political potential. So I really don't know what form, what shape it's going to take, whether pension for the unorganized sector or some other measures. But yes, the unorganized sector is very much on Mr. Modi, his government and the BJP's radar. Then I think the BJP's manifesto also spoke of pension for the small traders. So I think welfareism is going to be the name of the game and not toughness. I do not see this government veering towards toughness at all.
Yeah, toughness on the economic front, but what about toughness on the political front? Nija, you've been saying that Article 370, NRC implementation, you know, crackdown on Naxal movements, etc., is going to be a big part of, you know, Amit Shah's focus. Overall, do you think that you know, that muscular approach will sort of be enhanced, or at least the imagery of that will be enhanced in the days to come?
I think so. That will be done in a calibrated way. And remember that while we face the challenges on the economic front, which are huge and difficult to, you know, meet, it's all very well to say certain things, but actually to be able to deliver is a real challenge. There'll be the issues that underscore Hindu nationalism, on the basis of which Mr. Modi's second government has come to power, in addition to his reach out to the poorer sections of society. I think there'll be all that bit, that piece will probably offset any pain on the economic front, and they are masters at this, at calibrating this, and that is why those Home Ministry has been given to Mr. Amit Shah, and all the issues that you highlighted, you know, 35A, 370, Uniform Civil Code, Mandir, the National Register for Citizens, and maybe, of course, triple talaq, etc., etc. I think those are all in the works and will be pulled out, you know, as and when necessary to make progress on them.
Suman Sinha, do you see, you know, even passing legislation, whether it's on these kind of social issues or on economic issues getting easier and easier with the situation that the opposition is in. Of course, we're in early days right now and the opposition is still kind of stung and getting itself back together. But like Gautam was pointing out, in a couple of years, the BJP is likely to have a majority in the Rajya Sabha as well. What kind of a picture or situation would that put the current government in?
Well, I think it will put the government in a very strong position politically and legislatively. Clearly, I read or I read somewhere that by November 2020, they are likely to get a majority in the Rajya Sabha as well.
Yeah.
So it's really more like a year and a half that they might get to a situation where they have majorities in both houses of parliament. Now, I think that's good from an economic standpoint because it certainly allows them to not get held up or held hostage to by the opposition on important bills. For example, the Electricity Act amendment that has been pending for many years. We haven't had any change in our electricity sector since the 2003 Act was passed, and that's been 16 years. We need a lot of reform to happen in that area. So that's one of the many things I think that from an economic and sectoral standpoint that can be passed. Look, I don't want to comment on the political side because I'm not I think qualified enough to comment on the political side of things.
Fair enough.
But I think economically, certainly it allows them to be in a position where they will be strong enough that they can pass a number of things. And frankly, at that point, either they achieve a lot or they don't. And I think that will then be, totally, sort of the ball will totally be in their court. The only point I'd like to make to some of the comments being made earlier, that doing things for the poor of this country, coming out with schemes, welfare schemes or otherwise, I don't think that there is a mutual exclusivity between doing that and pursuing good economics, good wealth creating economics, GDP growth enhancing economics. I think in fact the two are actually very totally related with each other. I think the better the economy does, the more tax collections go up, and the more you have the ability of coming out with schemes that actually people have talked about. So I think in actual fact, the two are actually very related to each other. And I think Mr. Modi understands that and that to create more and more of such benefits for the poorer people of India, you actually have to have an economy that is strong, growing well and leading to good tax collection, tax growth. So I think that is something that they'll definitely understand and move forward on, I think fairly rapidly as well.
Yeah, but
I think if you look at, for example, the tax collections over the last year, GST collections have actually not grown very much, and that has constrained the ability of the government to not give handouts of more than 6,000 rupees, because they were also constrained by the fiscal deficit math, which they've somehow been able to keep at 3.4%.
But Mr. Sinha, now
I think that's very
extending,
positive because obviously having a high fiscal deficit is not good.
Exactly, and now you're extending that benefit to 15 crore families. So that direction is definitely set. Let me get comments to round up from Gautam on the fisc, and also we haven't spoken enough about the labor data that has come out today. So far, the approach in election mode, things are usually different, has been to sort of be in denial that there is really an employment issue. That report is now out. The government says you can't compare it, so you can't say it's a 45-year high. Nevertheless, do you think there is a plan in place to tackle that issue? And of course, increasing doles can't be a solution.
Yeah. So I think jobs has been a narrative rather than data. The data that has come is ugly. It's not good-looking data. The optics are terrible. When they say that it cannot be compared, they are correct as well, which means that we don't know whether there has been less jobs or more jobs. Let us take the government's view that that it's not so bad. Then from here, how do we move forward becomes the question. I believe in the next, not 100 days, even in the next 25 days, they need to come out with a sure shot plan. That plan depends on the second point I wish to make, which is, if you recall Mr. Modi's speech where he said that there are two kinds of people in our country, one who are poor, the other who want to get rid of poverty. I read that as wealth redistribution and wealth creation. I think we have discussed enough of wealth redistribution, entitlements and so on, because that is what governs the politics. That is what gets governments to power. That's what gets Modi, that's what got Modi to power. If you look at his season 1, there were 6 very, very sharp engagements with the people, Jan Dhan, loans and so on, that allowed him to leverage those touch points with the electorate across India, across caste and religion and gender, and deliver, and which got him the votes. But not adequate thought has been given on the wealth creation side. And as I was saying earlier, wealth creation now needs a rehaul of the legal system within which companies operate. We have to now look at, when we say global competitiveness,
Yes.
it is the legal infrastructure upon which this competitiveness also rests. When you look at industrial disputes, when you look at minimum wages, they are absurd laws. And when you look at the Factories Act, where you need to have a spittoon in every factory, even if it is a healthcare company, it is pathetic. All these laws need to be not modified, not amended, they need to be repealed, killed, and a new law which is in tune with the 21st century India that is heading towards a $5 trillion economy over the next 5 years need to be created.
No, absolutely.
Finally, the last point I want to make is,
Yes.
there was a talk about security, and I feel on the security front, we have something which what I call the fearsome foursome. We have Modi, we have Amit Shah, we have Jayshankar now, and we have Doval. I think between these 4, you can have no doubts that India's security and foreign policy is going to be muscular, aggressive, assertive. And I think this fearsome foursome is something that is going to cause a lot of heartburn to those on the other side.
Okay. Which side is the other side? I will leave to your interpretation. As we wrap up this show, I want to thank all of you for your comments. As we look at the team that has emerged, which will take forward not only the vision of the Prime Minister, but more importantly, the aspiration of billions of Indians who have bet on a better future. We leave you with pictures of some of these people taking office today. Thank you for watching.
I'd like to thank Honorable Prime Minister for giving me this opportunity to work in the Commerce and Industry Ministry.
मैं माननीय प्रधानमंत्री जी को आभार प्रकट करता हूं, उन्होंने इसे महत्वपूर्ण विभाग को हमें जिम्मेदारी दिया है।
आज हमें इस बात का गर्व है कि आवर प्राइम मिनिस्टर इज द बेस्ट प्राइम मिनिस्टर इन द वर्ल्ड।